I'm Phil Svitek, 360 Creative Coach, and welcome to my review of Blue Bayou, the latest film released on September 17th of this year. Now, it's a film that was in the Cannes Film Festival, and now it is finally out, right? And my review is going to consist of two parts, the non-spoiler stuff and then the spoiler stuff. And just even talking about the non-spoiler stuff, I'm going to keep it pretty vague in that sense, because even reading some of the reviews that exist online, I think they give away a little bit too much. And I think it's a much greater service to you as a viewer to know as little about it as possible, right? Watch the trailer, and the trailer gives you enough of the premise in terms of what the film's plot is about. But beyond that, I wouldn't read other sort of reviews, and not because I'm touting my own, but I just think they spoil a little bit too much. At the crux of it, in terms of the movie, is this man, this Korean adoptee named Antonio, who has a family, the wife being played by Alicia Vikander. Her name is Kathy. And there's an incident that happens at a grocery store, and then all of a sudden, Antonio is being detained by ICE, right? Immigration. And he could be deported because his paperwork, when he was adopted, wasn't filed properly. So that's kind of what the nugget of the movie is, right? And the trailer certainly gives you that aspect of it. But I will say, it's, I'm going to talk about the tone and things like that, but I won't give any more plot stuff until I get to the spoilers. And I'm going to call that out when that happens. So it's a beautiful movie from start to finish. Very, very impactful. This is one of those movies that really works at your core, right? It's such a human movie. And that's what I love, right? It doesn't, I love larger than life movies on screen, but this is life as it exists in our world, and showing you a different side that we don't experience on a daily basis, and capturing it in a way that is just so gorgeous, right? They chose to film on 16mm film, which is an interesting creative choice, but given the grit of the film, it really captures that beautifully. The cinematography, just really, really wonderful. And the acting on everyone's part, phenomenal, right? And the story, what I love about it is it's so nuanced, right? Every character plays in the grays. There's no character that's like the good guy. There's no character that's the bad guy. Everyone, you can see the justification of everyone's actions within this movie. Whether or not you agree with them, you understand why they're doing certain things, and that gives you pause and makes you really examine, where your ideologies and your beliefs lie, and where do you draw the line, because it's not so easy to necessarily draw that line. And that's what I love about movies, when they do that. They have the ability to do that, and this one certainly goes there. And the music selection in this is fantastic. One of the songs in the trailer, the trailer song that plays in the movie, and the way they do it is wonderful. And then the selections for other aspects, it has a wide range of music throughout. And I really, really appreciate and respect that. And it's not afraid to take its time as well. The movie's about an hour and 50 minutes. At no point does it really drag. The tension is there, and you're kind of always working towards something, and it doesn't always give you the answers right away, but you stick with it. Eventually everything makes sense. It reveals itself. So a lot of good stuff, and just it's really driven by the human connections, right? As I praised the actors, it starts with a wonderful script, but none of that matters if the actors don't deliver, and so everyone is just firing on all cylinders, and no one, everyone's in service of the movie. No one, you kind of hear some of those stories or reviews, even from like just everyday people that might say like, oh, the movie's good, but this person like steals the scenes and so forth. And this is like, even you look at like even Alicia Vikander, obviously, and just an incredible actress on every level, right? As noted by the Academy Award, right? But she's in service of the movie. She's not this superstar. She's the character she's portraying, and I love that aspect of it. So all in all, I recommend this movie. You will bawl your eyes out. So be warned in that sense. It's a movie that will really grip you, but I think it's for a good reason, and it will make you question certain things, and I don't see that as a bad thing, I saw it with a friend who is of Asian descent, who was also adopted, and she was crying at the end of this movie, and to the point that the credits rolled by, and we sat there together because she just needed to process this movie. And even though it's not my story, it didn't hit me in that same way, it doesn't mean it didn't hit me, because it definitely did. And that's what I respect and appreciate about this movie. So that's the non-spoiler stuff. Getting into the spoiler stuff, I'm just going to kind of talk about things that stood out to me. And I guess, starting with the ending, because I think that's, it's probably easiest for me, at least, to work backwards from there. That ending was brutal. And I mean that in the best way possible, right? It was just so gut-wrenching. And as it was kind of, I felt the movie coming to a close, I really kept that kind of internally asking myself of, is there going to be a good ending to this? Meaning like a happy note? And I was like, I don't think there's going to be a good note to this. And I had a glimmer of hope when the partner of Jessie's father, he makes his accidental confessional. I thought maybe in that moment that was going to be like this Hollywood type of ending where it's like, okay, there's this reveal, and they're gonna get Antonio. They're gonna go back to the judge, and they're gonna find a loophole, in the thing, because he really was gonna go to court, but he was basically prevented, and everything would be all right. That's what my heart wanted, and yet the movie didn't deliver that. And even though it didn't, it was the perfect ending, because it was the only ending for this movie, because it's the true ending, right? As opposed to this Hollywood ending. And man, it was so gut-wrenching. And what I felt in that moment, right? Some people can look at the Vietnamese storyline, the subplot, as a little superfluous, but no. I loved it because that's what drove that decision at the end. When the Vietnamese father, he says, or he answers the question of, did you ever regret splitting up the kids? And he says, never. Antonio's been doing at every point in this movie, however, on the surface, bad it may have been, lying, stealing, and so forth, he was always really trying to do it for the right reasons, and he felt that was the only choice that he had. And so, as a final act in that moment, he really knew that, he was not going to be able to provide, where he was going, it was such an unknown. and knowing from his past, what he might be bringing someone into, he just couldn't let Jessie or Kathy go through with that, and the loving thing was to let them go. But man, it's all the feels in that moment, and but I don't think it would have played the same way without the Vietnamese storyline. I really wouldn't have. And the other aspect of it was, that so often we as Americans do look at, someone of Asian descent. We're lucky, audiences are lucky if they get to see sort of one culture, but it's like, there's so many Asian cultures in any community, and they are different. And we, even like little Jessie at the beginning when she says, she looks like you, it's the innocence of a child who doesn't know any better, but obviously that's not a proper thing to say, because ultimately they are different. One's Korean, one's Vietnamese. And I like the friendship that they spark, and the fact that even Kathy got a chance to kind of really be indoctrinated into that side of things, and she embraced it, right? Like Alicia Vikander singing, and yes, that was really her singing, was just an amazing thing. Like, she really went for it. And I thought it was beautiful, and she tried to, embrace all that and so forth, right? Like, no different than even Antonio was, because ultimately it wasn't necessarily his culture either. I mean, just the way he wrapped his food, and the little girl looks at him like, you're terrible type of thing, it just had so many precious, beautiful moments. And then when we speak of, just every person being at fault on something, right? It's not like Antonio was perfect, but for Kathy, right? You could look at her in one perspective and see her as this noble person and things like that, but it's really because of her that Antonio was in this situation to begin with, because she was withholding Jessie from her biological father, and even Antonio said, hey, maybe she should see her father. And then, the white woman privilege in the grocery store is really what kind of sparked all this. Her yelling at him, and then kind of it being taken to the extreme by this, I'll call him a rogue cop, because, that's what he did. He kind of went rogue, and, so there was that undertone of it. It's like no one was perfect. But at the same time, like I said, there was a justification to it. You could see where they're coming from, and it just sucks, when those things don't align, because, certainly Kathy and Antonio, you could see that they were made for each other, and yet they still differed on a number of things. Like I said, with Jessie being able to see her father, and then, once the reveal happens that Antonio's been stealing bikes again, that culminates into this really emotional scene. And man, they just play. They really went for it. Like, the way Justin and Alicia portray that scene. Like, as I recall, it was filmed in one shot. Maybe it's a 2 to 3 minute scene. And you just see the snot and the air bubbles coming out of Alicia's, on her face. And, you could see the pain in Justin. Like, he was, as Antonio, he was really trying to, do what's right, and kind of just not get anyone involved unless he needed to. And then once he's faced with this, he finally reveals it, but it's too late. And certainly Kathy's mother then doesn't help, because, she's kind of this, person within Kathy's ear that's always like, see, he's not so good, because she doesn't see the full picture of Antonio, which speaks to this greater thing. Like, we don't, so many people, even in our own lives, are so quick to like give judgment on any relationship, right? It doesn't have to be a romantic relationship, but at the same time, we have to take it with a grain of salt because they're not in that relationship. They're not seeing the full scope of everything. And so, I appreciate how many beautiful moments we did have with Antonio and Kathy and really saw their love. And that's why it was so gut-wrenching to see those moments when they're at odds against each other, and when finally the thing of it happens where, he really is going to go, he goes to see his adoptive mother. She declines him, but he's still going to go to the court date anyway, but then he gets taken away and boom, gets beaten the shit out of, but then comes back to try to explain himself, and she just won't have it. They're just on opposite pages, and it's just brutal. And then, of course, he's just led to this idea like all he has is suicide and driving that bike into the water. Lots going on there, And for me, like, the choice to begin with Jessie, knowing in hindsight that the movie ends with him and Jessie, as they're torn apart, the fact that it begins with that is a perfect, like, bookend to everything. And especially because, the whole day that we experience with Jessie and Antonio really begins because, as she says, you're going to leave me like my dad. And he's like, no. So he wants to like have that precious time. But then, of course, that decision is what really sparks the inciting incident of all this, because that's what the argument in the grocery store is all about. This idea that he took her out of school, to just basically drive around. Whew. It's a movie I want to rewatch again. And I will. In fact, I'm studying it because I just think there's so many things, even from a technical standpoint, that it does so well that I want to show it to someone that I'm working on my upcoming feature with, so that way they kind of see like how things work, and how we can like take advantage of certain things, similarly to how they did. But yeah, it's a movie that I have to be prepared for because it is so gut-wrenching and emotional, and yes, it is melodramatic, but I think too often times we use it as a pejorative when really it's just a term for something that is just full of emotion. And yes, it is full of emotion, but it shouldn't. That doesn't mean it's bad. In fact, that's what I love about it. It's boldness to go for the things that it goes for. In the way that it does. That's the beauty of all of it, and I'm so moved by this movie, and I hope people really give it a shot and have a chance to see it and go see it, because I think even its message, right? Obviously, the message that there is a fucked up law within this country that is deporting people who have a right to be here by all accounts, but just through a flaw in the system, they're being deported, and when they do, there's a high suicide rate, because the sad part is, as adopted kids, it's like they have to be adopted because in some sense, they weren't wanted somewhere, and there's also a lot of abuse that kind of goes into that aspect. That's why they put that in with Antonio, because some of these adopted kids do go through abuse. And of course, a lot of them have their own experience where, they're not like the other kids, aka white, in their schools, let's say. And, so you go through society kind of as an outcast, and then, trying to find your own way. And then all of a sudden, it's like you don't even belong here, and then bam, you're shipped off to this country that you're supposed to be from, but the level of connection, is individual for every person, but I imagine most people don't have a strong connection. And so, yeah, that fucks with you on an existential level to then say, well, where is my place? And it's sad, it does lead people to suicide. You know, and as the movie says, like, the number of people that get deported is unknown, really. And so I can't imagine people knowing the suicide rate of the people that are deported. So I think it highlights a really powerful message that that we need to be aware of, because it's not something that I was aware of before this movie. And, you know, I think you can have great art with a good message, and it doesn't have to be didactic, you know, where it's just telling me something. You know, this dramatizes all of it and tells a wonderfully human story. And that's why the message resonates, because it does that. So that's Blue Bayou. A really powerful movie. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my thoughts on it. If you have thoughts of your own, as I'm sure you do, maybe you have questions, you know, please share down in the comment box or hit me up on social media at Svitek. You know, I shared these thoughts to engage in a dialogue. You know, I don't want this just to be a singular act, you know, where I espouse my ideology for the film and then you just take in whatever. I really like the movie. I want to work with it, right, and kind of learn, you know, based off of what you're thinking as well. So please, you know, let's get that dialogue going. Anyway, thank you for taking the time to tune in. I appreciate you. I hope to see you next time.